Hey YouTube, welcome to my January wrap-up where I read a lot more books than this, but they were either via audio or on my Kindle. So, first things first I want to mention is that if you haven't checked out my Bookstagram and my new book review system I'm doing, it's really fun and y'all should go check that out. It is She Is Booked and the info is down below. Also, in the month of January, I participated in Tyra and the Books' Friends Readathon, and so all of the info for that will be linked down below. But I read like a lot of books in a way that I wasn't like super participating in the readathon because my life was really crazy. So if I hold up a book and talk about it and it was in the readathon, I'll have the prompt come across the bottom and say like what prompt it met and all of that, because I want to make my life harder for editing Casey, and I just don't have my life together at this exact moment to like tell you up front which prompts they were. So Tyra, that was a great readathon. I had a lot of fun, and next time you do a readathon, I hope to be a lot more active, but I just really, this month destroyed me a little bit, and I read by not sleeping very much. So without further ado, let's get into the actual video where I talk about the books. So the first book I read this year was The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. And I just want to say that I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I think its original purpose was to be broadcast, or not broadcast, was to be published for children, and it was a great time. Hi, puppy. What you doing? There's a dog. And I really loved it, and I will say it has beautiful illustrations, and the story is basically just about the boy and him wandering and meeting these people and just kind of getting really great life advice, and I think everybody, no matter your age, should read this. It is beautiful. That's about all I have to say about it officially. Yes, and I'm checking out my book reviews that I wrote to make sure I don't forget something. Oh, I gotta go deal with that. Alright, the next book I read this month was A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. I guess play is probably a better word than book, but I'm going to count it as a book I read. The first thing I'll say is I read this without the note for Shakespeare. I was like, I wasn't very confused necessarily, but I was wanting to make sure I got the whole point of what the story was supposed to be about, so I went ahead and read No Fear Shakespeare immediately after finishing reading this, and I just want to say there's absolutely no shame in utilizing resources like that, because iambic pentameter and like the archaic Old English is not like super easy to understand, so anywho, that's what I did, and that really worked well for me because I had a hard time kind of figuring out what this book was trying to say. But needless to say, this is A Midsummer's Night Dream is a hilarious comedy filled with romance, potions, magic, hallucinations, fairies, and all that. You follow a 4 young Athenians from like Athens, Greece, and the adventures that they have over a night in the middle of the summer. And it's designed in a way that the fairies use their magic and the hallucinations to accidentally cause the wrong people to fall in love with each other who were not supposed to get married, so they use the magic and the hallucinations and the experience to kind of reset everything in the way it's supposed to be, and then to convince the people that everything that happened over the course of the night was just a dream. I had a good time reading it. I did obviously have to get assistance in fully understanding what was going on, but it was a great time. The next book I read was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and I believe this is a memoir or it's a biography, one of the two, but it is nonfiction, and it is Viktor Frankl telling about his life experience that he had and his journey to discover the meaning behind the horrific suffering he went through while he was in the Nazi concentration camps during World War II. And so it was a very sad book. I listened to the audiobook for it, which was good for me because I probably would have been a little too, like, not that I could separate myself from it more during the audiobook, but it would have been harder for me to get through physically just because of the heavy, heavy topics it talks about. But I will say, and then the latter part of the book is about his own theory in the psychological area. I'm not big on what the terminology is, so I might be getting this wrong, but it's his own, like, theory for therapy, which he calls logotherapy, and how his experiences in the concentration camp and what he was able to do to help people while he was there, because he was a doctor of psychology or something like that. And also all of the things he went through helped him to develop this this logotherapy, which is different from psychotherapy, which is what, like, if I went to therapy, I would be technically going and experiencing psychotherapy. He explains, like, how everything he went through helped him to develop this and, like, what that means. And there's lots of good advice in the book, and I think everybody should read it. I know Catherine from her channel used to be Catherine Reads, but I think she changed the name a little bit. But I'll link her video describing, because she did a dedicated review to just this book, and I really recommend you go watch it if you want to determine if this book would be something you should read. I really think everybody should read it. It was very powerful, and I learned a lot, and I got to just be more familiar with some of the suffering that people went through, which is always good to put your own life in perspective by seeing what other people have gone through. Anywho, so on a less depressing note, I then read, I'm going to scroll up to my next set of book reviews. I read The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. I did enjoy it. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as a lot of other people did. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars overall. And so basically this novel, you were following Addie, or Adeline Larue, as she, on the eve of the night of her wedding that she doesn't want, she prays to the gods that exist after dark, which is what she was told her life during her youth to not ever do by this lady that lives in her French village. She basically makes a deal with the devil, because that's what the gods are after the dark. They're the evil, dark, devilish, Lucifer adjacent gods. Anyway, so she made a deal with the devil to live, I wrote it nicely to live forever unencumbered. And what I mean by that is she wanted to live the life she wanted. She didn't want to have to listen to anybody else or have other people make plans for her. So inadvertently, this deal that she makes with the devil, she's not only unencumbered, is that she's unremembered. And it was beautifully written. Victoria V. Schwab did a great job with this book. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely repetitive in some parts for me that I was just not a huge fan of, and it was a little slow. And I'm not super into how romance-driven the book was, and there was definitely things that it wasn't perfect about it, but everybody loves it for good reason, because it is a good book. I had a great time reading it. I just don't think I'm going to reread it. And I'm trying to be a little harsher with my ratings, because I shouldn't give everything a 5-star, because then 5 stars are meaningless. So yeah, it was good. The Late Night Book Club, I know, did their December book on that, and if you want a good in-depth discussion, I'll make sure I try and link that down below. And yeah, it was a good read. I then read the second book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence, which is the first one is Lives of Locke Lamora, and the second one is Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed The Lives of Locke Lamora a little bit more than this one, but this was still great, and I still think the relationship that Jean and Locke have is just such a, like, good friendship, good, like, support of each other, and they're truly, like, blood brothers who will do everything they can in their power to protect the other one from experiencing harm and suffering, and that is very clear in what happens in this book. But so if you haven't read Lives of Locke Lamora, I'm going to try and word what the book was about in a way that doesn't spoil what happens at the end of that one, because it's set pretty immediately after the end of that book, but we're following Jean and Locke, obviously, and they left the city they were in due to things that happened at the end of that book, and they're now in this place called Talvarar, and they're building. Stuff happens at the beginning that you have to get through and all of that, but basically the thieving that they're trying to do in this book is they have this long game planned with the Sin Spire, which is this, like, gambling tower. I envisioned it like being a pyramid sort of thing, and so there's gambling and plotting and all of that happens, and unfortunately, their plans get foiled because that's what happens in these books, and they're thrust out into the high seas, the Red Seas specifically in this book, where they're getting to expand their thieving experience and repertoire to include piracy, and a lot of shenanigans happen, and it's a great book, and they get to learn how to be like sailors, which is kind of cool to watch because they're like, we don't like boats. So watching how they react to getting thrust into that and the other stuff that happens. I'm being vague because you should try and be surprised by these books and the plot and all of that. So it was very good. I had a great time reading it, and I'm very excited to pick up the third one very soon. And the fourth book does come out this year, hopefully. So I'm just all sorts of excited for that. The next book I read was The Lost City of Z, which I actually own a physical copy of, but I didn't think to grab it. So I'm going to post the picture I posted of it on my Instagram. And it is a nonfiction story about the recounting the life and harrowing explorations into the Amazon and the ultimate disappearance of the final expedition from a British explorer, Percy Fawcett. And his son was on that expedition, as was his son's good friend. So it kind of recounts the scientific and physical preparations and multiple expeditions into the Amazon by this Fawcett explorer, all searching for what he called Z, it's very much like the El Dorado, the Lost City of Gold, just the big civilizations that existed in the Amazon prior to the Spanish coming over and ultimately infecting all of them with diseases and killing them and destroying them. But Fawcett believed that the Lost City was still there and that there was riches and all of these things. So he went on multiple expeditions, and we get to see that. We also get to follow different explorers of the era that were doing this, and there's a lot of stuff about how the explorers from the United States, from Britain, from other European or Western countries, the perceived notions they had going into the jungle versus what they actually would expect, and how a lot of them were still of the mindset that you had to have been originally of a kind of European descent to be a successful, to have a successful civilization, which is obviously racist and incorrect. But they went into a lot of the notions that these explorers had and what they expected to find, and the suffering and stuff, and how they were ultimately wrong, but based on a lot of these things, and they didn't believe, and how the Europeans and all the Western civilizations didn't believe that if you didn't have writing, you couldn't have a successful humongous civilization with thousands and thousands of people. They were like, that's not possible. They're just savages and things like that. So ultimately, the final expedition occurs, and that's what, and the individuals did disappear and were never heard from again. The bodies were never found, and I think it was a really, it was a very interesting story, and I like the exploration stories and things like that. So if you like stuff like that, then I think you would enjoy this book. The audiobook was great. That's about all I have to say on that one. The next book I read, I did read throughout the course of the Southern Reach trilogy, but I'm going to physically hold those 3 books up and talk about them at the end. But I did also read the Graceling Realm book number 4, which is was a series I loved as a young adult, and I think it was one of the first truly fantasy series that I absolutely loved. The 4th book is called Winterkeep. It came out, and I read it very quickly. It was so fun to get thrown back into the world of Graceling Fire and Bitter Blue. If you haven't read those books and want to not hear what I'm going to say, because it does spoil Bitter Blue a little bit with the plot of this book is, I'll put on the bottom of the screen here where to skip to, because I think you should. I think these books are written for everybody. I loved them, and they were not. It's one of the few young adult books that I still enjoy reading, and I reread the whole series a year or 2 ago, and it still was great and held up as an adult. So if you don't want to hear about the series because you want to read it, please listen to whatever's down here and skip to it. So now that the spoiler warning is out of the way, Winterkeep follows, I believe it's set 4 years after the events of Bitter Blue, and we do see that Bitter Blue is now queen of the Monsea kingdom, and we get to follow her and her band of advisors, some of which are members of the council that we got to, were like Katsa and Poe were. We do hear mentions of them in this book, but we don't actually get to see their characters. We're definitely following Bitter Blue and her companions in this book, which is Gideon, which we did meet in the original series, and her half-sister Hava, I believe is what her name is. And so there's, like the other books on the Graceling realm, they're very political, and it's very much about these kingdoms and their resources that they have and things like that. And so we follow Gideon, Hava, Bitter Blue, and a few of her other advisors as they go travel to Winterkeep, which is in the newly discovered area known as Torla, because there's been a lot of stuff in this area where she's sent people previously to inquire about the particular energy resource. It's kind of like oil, but it's not. It's named something else, and I don't think I wrote it down on my review here. I did not write it down on my Instagram review, but there's been some drama. She's sent envoys and they've disappeared or they've drowned mysteriously. So they're like, okay, we got to go and figure out what's going on. So they go over there, where they are immediately thrust into a lot of drama, and it's Bitter Blue disappears very early on in the book, and a lot of stuff happens. But in this area, we do follow a few new characters. I don't think I wrote down their names, but there's a lot of very interesting things about the way this kingdom is run in comparison to how Bitter Blue is trying to run Monsea and different things like that. And I will mention it. This book, Bitter Blue is one of the younger characters in the cast, and she's 23, and there is definitely a lot more risque moments, so to speak, which I really don't mind as an adult, but if I have any like teenage viewers, you might just keep that in mind when you get to this book. And I have always felt that Kristin Keshore's books are very ahead of their time in the things they discuss and the and all of that. So just keep that in mind as you read this book. And there's quite a lot of sex, for example. It's still very YA in terms of it is fade to black, but I just wanted to give people a heads up in case they're not super comfortable with that, because there's not nearly as much of that in the previous 3 books. But yeah, it was so fun to read this. I gave it, I think, ultimately a 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't say why here in this, but I think it was just that I really, really had a great time reading it, but it's not one of my favorite books, obviously. So again, I recommend this Graceling series to no end. Everybody should read it. Everybody should love it. And, or not everybody has their own taste in books. Not everybody should love it, but everybody should read it. Winterkeep was just a great addition to the universe, and I'm really excited to see if Kristin Keshore writes any more books. I would love, 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 love to read them. And so, last but certainly not least, on my January wrap-up, I read the Southern Reach trilogy, which is Annihilation, Authority, and Acceptance. I finished this one this morning. The book review for these is not yet up on my Instagram because I just finished them and I wanted to do one post for the full series. So if this is a little less good of a book review because I'm still processing, that is why. And I would expect in the next few days for the book review to be on the Instagram. Whenever I post it, I'll go ahead and link it in the comments area, so y'all can go check that out. But so basically, the trilogy as a whole is a post-apocalyptic experience, and but in a way where you're still partially in the world that we know I think it's set like in the Carolinas or in Florida. That's kind of what I imagine. But it's in the United States, and you're in like a fairly modern day setting. I don't know when these books were published, but I think they've been out since like 2007. So with that kind of technology, you're still very much in the world. But then there was an event that occurred that created this Area X. And so in Annihilation, you follow a cast of 4 women. And the majority of the book is from the perspective, if not this whole short first one is from the perspective of the biologist going to adventure into this Area X to just try to collect evidence, is trying put together more of what's going on. They're part of the 12th expedition, so there's been 11 other expeditions that have failed before them, and the biologist is the main character we follow the perspective from, and that's interesting because her husband was on the 11th expedition, so we get a little bit of backstory into why she decided to go on this expedition and all of that. So this book is, I read it in it's pretty short, but I read it in 2 sittings, where I read the first half of the book and then I read the second half of the book because the suspense was through the roof, and it was a fantastic book. I absolutely loved reading it. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. And it's just, all of them are like thriller books. That's what the genre is specifically, edging towards horror in this final one, but this one is definitely like a post-apocalyptic thriller, and I really, really enjoyed reading it. I super recommend it. Getting into Authority, where we jump into... we don't even jump. It just is immediately after the end of Annihilation. We're here in Authority, and this one's more of a police detective style thriller, where we get a lot more insight into the organization that is researching and investigating Area X. We get a lot more on the people that are... It's the Southern Reach and Central are the 2 organizations that we kind of get a lot of insight into in this book. And the main character we follow here is the new director of the Southern Reach, because the director, the old director, went on this 12th expedition as the psychologist. So John Rodriguez, or he calls himself Control, is in this book trying to put together all of the different puzzle pieces to figure out what the heck is going on, and why there is a lot of there's a lot of things in terms of the political bureaucracy happening between Southern Reach and Central. And my computer screen I've been filming for 20 minutes. Here we go. And we basically just follow him as he's trying to put together what's really going on with these 2 organizations, what's really going on in the Southern Reach. It's a lot slower than Annihilation, and I really would have given it just like 3 stars if the ending wasn't just spectacular. So I did ultimately give it a 4 out of 5 stars because of how the ending was and how things are starting to come together in the universe between these 2 books. In Acceptance, in this book, we really get to see a lot of the stuff coming together and a lot of the mystery and a lot of the characters. So this one is multi-perspective, whereas the other 2 are not. So we get to follow the version of the biologist we have at this point. She calls herself Ghostbird. We follow Control, Ghostbird, the old director. The director is number 2, whose name is Grace. We get to follow people who existed in kind of in flashbacks in Area X before the cataclysmic event. And we get to follow individuals inside of Central, which we haven't really gotten that perspective before, because in Authority, we were just focusing on the director of the Southern Reach. So in Acceptance, we definitely get to see a lot of things tied together. We get to see a lot of mysteries revealed. Very suspenseful, but in a way that there's a lot of monstrous elements, so we get to see a lot more horror in this novel. And I finished it literally this morning, so I'm kind of still processing. So definitely expect some more cohesive thoughts in the Instagram book review. But this whole trilogy was... So, I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars because the pace was a lot more like the pace in Annihilation, which I enjoyed more than the slowness of Authority. But this was like a slow build. The foreboding was increasing, and the foreshadowing, it was super good, super intense in this book. But it was a lot more of a slow build to the horror elements that we get in this one. And this one was just we were thrown in to this new world and everything that was going on with maximum freak out mode on. So overall, I had a really great time reading the trilogy. I'm going to hold it in the correct direction. And also, real quick before we finish, can we talk about how beautiful these are? We're going to do some close-ups here, and look at the end paper here, and the same thing on this side is pretty, and then the back is this, and the spine is all nice. And in Authority, there's a bunny. And there's some craziness in the inside cover as well. Same with the back. And as you go through and read these, you'll understand what, like, this plant means and what the rabbit means and what the owl means in this one. So yeah, the owl, the pink interior and like end paper zone or whatever, just the inside cover is beautiful. And they're just so pretty, aren't they? So pretty, so pretty. So yeah, that was a pretty good reading month considering how busy I was in my real life, and I did a lot of audiobook this month, and I don't expect next month will be any different. So yes, Tyra, I had a really great time applying the books I was reading to the prompts for the Friends Readathon. If I have, like, I might do a final graphic and explain, just, if I have made that final graphic that I'm going to put on Instagram, I'll put it here. No guarantees or anything if I actually do that, because I've set myself up quite a steep editing adventure on this video so far, and I am carrying over a few books that I'd started that I hadn't finished in this month, which is The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I started Childhood, Boyhood, Youth because I want to hang out, which is Tolstoy. I want to hang out with the great Dickens versus Tolstoy debate. Hopefully I'll get a chance to finish that before they do their live show. We'll see. I attempted to reread The Shining by Stephen King, so for the late night book club, but I ultimately decided I didn't have time to do that. I didn't want to just stress myself out. And I have read it, and I did love it, so I'm going to go still hang out during their live show, which should be in like 3 hours now. Ooh. And, I was reading another book. I started one of my classic books that I was going to do for my 12 classics I'm going to read, and haven't finished that yet. And also, I just started Grapes of Wrath like 2 days ago for the Steinbeck thing that I'm doing with, for both myself, and then I'm about to start this one. I'm about to start this one with Cat tomorrow from Katie Reads. So overall, it was a great reading month. I didn't read quite as much as I was hoping to because I set really ambitious goals. But you know what? Life happens, and I will catch up. Or I won't, and it'll just be fine. So, with that, thank you all for watching. If you made it this far in the video, leave a funny emoji of your choice in the comments, and I will see you next time with my February wrap-up. I do want to just let you know that there will be some more videos coming out if I have time. I'm going to try and vlog my reading of the Steinbeck books for reasons. So if I do actually get a chance to vlog those, you guys will get to see that. But who knows, honestly, at this point, if I'm going to have that time. So I just wanted to give you all a big check-in here, almost. And I think I have an actual video that I already filmed about, like, how behind I am at my reading goals. We'll see if that one comes out or not, but anywho. Thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, check out the book reviews on Instagram, because those take some effort, and I want validation or something like that. Woohoo! I will see y'all next time. Thanks for, again, I've said thanks like 6 times now. I'm gonna just stop talking. Bye!